Well, hello, friends. Welcome back to Commute Talk. Today, I thought I would talk a little bit about API discovery and how you can discover a good API for something that doesn't exist yet, and how you can work your way towards it. And I guess what is my process for doing this? Because this is something I do a lot lately. Obviously, in systems programming, you have to make APIs all the time. So the way I do it is something I learned from my friend Antti. And the basic idea is that you start by writing the client code that uses the API. Even though the API doesn't exist yet, you write out some client code, like just some little sample code or something that calls into this API. And then that forces you to just sketch out sort of what it might look like when you're using the API. And if you're experienced with programming, then this part should be relatively straightforward, because you're just like taking the abstract concept of what it is that you want to accomplish, and you're sort of describing it in pseudocode, if you will. But do write this part out in like actual real C++ or whatever language you're using, right? It's not supposed to be pseudocode. It's supposed to be the real language, just not that the thing doesn't exist yet. And then the second part, once you have the client code looking sort of the way you would like, then the second part is to go and actually add these classes and functions. But you don't have to give them data members or anything. Just add them so that the code can compile. But it doesn't need to do anything other than compile. And then once you have it compiling, then you know that, like, okay, so this is like passes the basic sanity test. Then what I normally do is that in each of the functions, I add like an assertion that this is not reached. Even though I know it's going to be reached, it's just that this way, when I run the thing, then if I get to some part that I haven't implemented yet, then I'm like, okay, well, this is the thing I have to implement now. And then I also start adding data members at this point, and figuring out the ownership model and like the relationships between the different classes that I'm adding. Because once you establish the ownerships, and sort of if you're using smart pointers or some kind of descriptive programming where you can describe with your data types like who owns who, and like which things are shared ownership, which things are single ownership, and so on. Once you've written all of those things out, it starts to sort of become clear how this thing is going to work. And then once you have the functions, the data members, and the ownership and relationships, then the rest of the API can just sort of happen around this, if that makes sense. It usually becomes self-fulfilling at that point. Now, the thing to do next, which I don't normally do this if I'm like recording my programming, because it would just be kind of uninteresting to watch. But what I like to do next is to throw the whole thing away and start over, because now I know all of these. I have like learned all of these things about what I'm trying to do, and shit, I have to get off the highway here in a very confusing way. So now that I've learned everything that I can about the initial attempt at implementing this, then I can throw it away and start over. And like the first part there that we throw away, it can take anything from like 5 minutes to 5 hours. It doesn't really matter, because you know when you get to that point that like, okay, now I understand what I'm trying to do. And then because I find then that throwing it away and starting over, you usually end up with way better, way cleaner, and way simpler code at the end. Because all of these little things that you were testing out along the way, and maybe that you didn't realize that they were like not necessary or not good, if you give them a do-over, then those things tend to just go away by themselves. Then you don't end up with that kind of cruft in your code. I mean, like abstraction cruft or design cruft. Of course, it's not a perfect method, but it does tend to work for me. So I'm pretty happy with it. And it's something I've been using for many years. So I guess I guess I'm always curious to hear how other people do this. So if you have your own method of designing APIs, I would love to hear about that. And do you ever do it together with other people? Because I've done it together with other people a bunch, and it can be very slow, but it's also very interesting to talk about APIs with people. Anyways, I guess that was just something that was on my mind today. So I hope you all have a good day, and thanks for hanging out with me on the commute. See you guys next time. Bye.